For hundreds of thousands of years, another kind of human walked this earth. They were stronger than us, their bones heavier, their grip fierce enough to crush without effort. They thrived in frozen landscapes where modern humans would perish within days. Yet they were not brutes. They crafted tools, cared for their wounded, and painted symbols in the darkness of caves. They were the Neanderthals, and their story is not just about extinction. It's about strength, survival, and the hidden legacy that still lives within us. If this story made you see humanity in a new light, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who loves history. Drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing our global community come together. 400,000 years ago, Europe hardened into a continent of cold. Glaciers advanced and withdrew in long breaths. Forests thinned to wind-bitten steppe. Rivers carried ice the color of steel. In that shifting severity, a population of humans became cut off from kin to the south. Isolation did not diminish them. It sculpted them. Across thousands of seasons, natural selection favored bodies that held heat, stored power, and endured. What emerged was no caricature of a caveman, but a precise answer to climate. Their skeletons tell the story with clarity. Frames grew stocky, limbs shortened, and mass concentrated close to the core, expressions of biological rules that conserve warmth. Chests widened low and deep, making room for powerful lungs. Ribs arced like barrel staves. Pelvises broadened, lowering the center of gravity for balance on broken ground and ice. Everywhere, the places where muscle anchors to bone flare large, as if the body took notes on a lifetime of effort and wrote them into itself. The head followed function. Noses lengthened and widened internally, turning frigid air along a longer, warmer path to protect the lungs. Sinuses expanded, the mid-face projected slightly forward, a bony buttress against repeated stress. The chin, so prominent in our species, did not jut the same way. Instead, a robust jaw curved back, suited to gripping and processing tough materials. None of this was primitive excess. It was engineering shaped by place. Cold demanded more than insulation. It demanded energy. Muscle is a furnace even at rest, and these were muscular people. Caloric needs rose with latitude, with winter, with labor. The answer was a diet tuned to environment. Animal resources rich in fat and marrow, supplemented by seasonal plants and the bitter medicinal knowledge gathered by experience. A body like this did not merely survive cold. It burned through. Its landscape taught its lessons daily. Daylight thinned in winter. Wind never quite stopped. Yet the archaeological record shows not retreat, but deliberate occupation. Hearths bloom as rust-red circles in cave sediments, layered one upon another like pages. Flaked stone workshops sit where good raw material outcrops. Camps cluster at migration corridors. The picture is of people who knew where reindeer would funnel through a valley and when a river crossing would turn treacherous. It is the intimacy of long residence. Isolation cut two ways. It protected a way of living, and it narrowed options. With few neighbors beyond the horizon, problems were solved with what the land offered: wood, stone, sinew, hide, and fire. A straight shaft could be trued in coals. A flake struck at the right angle became scraper, knife, or point. Adhesives. Brewed from bark, tar spoke of planned heat and careful timing. In all of it, the rhythm was the same. Use the near, refine the simple, return to what works. The climate was never still. Glacial pulses shifted animals and water, turning familiar routes into hazards and opening others overnight. Lives adjusted without drama, by reading signs the way we read text. Children learned early how snow sounds at different temperatures, how tracks soften during a thaw, how mountains throw sound when herds are near. In such a school, memory was a tool. Elders, repositories of local weather and long paths, mattered. Step into one of their caves today, and the quiet is a teacher. Light shows the soot-dark ceiling, the slight rise of a sleeping platform, the scatter of flakes where stone was worked, the hearth placed so smoke slides outward rather than down. Nothing is wasted. The beauty is functional. Arrangements that keep heat, prevent drafts, and separate work from rest. It is the geometry of care. None of this should be mistaken for ease. Strength here was paid for in work, cold, and risk. Bones record healed fractures because lives continued after falls, fights, and bad winters. Communities absorbed the cost. A person slowed by injury still kept a fire alive, still scraped hides, still taught a safer river crossing. In this arithmetic, resilience was social as much as it was anatomical. To call them freaks of nature is to admit how far place can press a body and a culture. Pleistocene Europe asked a narrow question: who can stay? The Neanderthals answered with mass and patience, with lungs that drew hard air and hands that found solutions in wood and stone. They were not a lower rung on a ladder that does not exist. They were a balanced branch on a broad tree, matched to the weight of winter. Bodies, however, are only beginnings. Power must be applied, lungs must feed effort, bone must meet purpose. Out on those pale plains, strength moved into action, and risk became routine. In the next chapter, we follow that motion, to the close-range hunt, to the injuries it left behind, and to the courage required to stand within reach of animals that could end a life in a heartbeat. The skeleton of a Neanderthal is not subtle. Where our bones are light, theirs are heavy. Where ours show fine points of delicacy, theirs flare thick and solid, marked with broad scars where muscle once pulled with unrelenting force. Every rib, every joint, every limb tells of a body built not for stillness, but for struggle. If Chapter 1 showed us how climate shaped their form, this chapter reveals how survival carved those forms into weapons. Consider the femur, the great bone of the thigh. In a modern human, it can fracture under sudden torque or the wrong fall. In a Neanderthal, it was thicker, denser, able to withstand forces that would shatter ours. Arms carried the same message: humeri, with enlarged attachment sites for biceps, and triceps, forearms built like tools themselves. Even grip strength, often the simplest marker of force, was staggering. Where most of us might manage 80 to 100 pounds of crushing power, theirs has been estimated at over 200 in each hand. Imagine a handshake that could pulp bone, but strength was not decorative. It had purpose, and the purpose was the hunt. Neanderthals crafted spears of wood hardened in fire, their weight balanced forward. They were not meant to fly like arrows. They were designed to be driven, thrust into muscle, and hide at arm's length. Unlike later humans who developed the safety of ranged weapons, Neanderthals closed distance. Theirs was a hunting style of confrontation, of courage, of risk. The animals they chose were not forgiving. Cave bears, woolly rhinoceroses, bison, mammoths. These were prey large enough to crush or gore a hunter with ease. To face such animals without distance weapons meant living constantly at the edge of fatal injury. Archaeology confirms it. Neanderthal skeletons bear trauma patterns eerily similar to those of modern rodeo riders: rib fractures, skull breaks, shoulder dislocations. Healed wounds across 80% of adult remains. Every life carried scars. One of the most famous skeletons belonged to the so-called Old Man of La Chapelle. He lived into his 40s, already an advanced age for the Paleolithic. His body shows a biography of hardship: broken ribs knit back, crooked, crushed toe bones, joint disease, tooth loss. Yet he lived years beyond these injuries, a sign that his people did not leave him behind. In every healed fracture, we see not just toughness, but the quiet strength of community. This battle-ready body was also adapted to endure repeated shock. Barrel chests supported lungs that could power bursts of exertion. Shorter limbs reduced leverage against injury. Broader pelvises stabilized movement on uneven terrain. Taken together, the design is not of a sprinter or marathoner, but of a grappler, an athlete of force and sudden violence. Where our species leaned toward distance and endurance, Neanderthals specialized in closeness, in impact. The cost was constant. To eat enough to maintain such mass, they required between 3,500 and 5,000 calories daily, an Olympic diet simply to survive. It meant frequent hunting, near continuous risk. Their injuries reveal that risk clearly. One skeleton shows a crushing blow to the skull, another the healed trace of a punctured lung, another a spinal injury consistent with being trampled. This was not an occasional hazard, it was a condition of life. Yet strength gave more than survival. It gave resilience in cold. Muscle burns fuel, fat insulates. In glacial winters, these bodies radiated warmth enough to endure with less clothing, fewer fires, less stored food. What might kill a modern human quickly could be endured longer by them. Their size and density were their armor against both beast and climate. Still, power alone was not enough. Injuries healed because others carried burdens, shared food, tended fires. The battle in which these bodies were built was collective as much as individual. Every hunt demanded cooperation, flanking, driving, ambushing. Strength mattered, but so did timing, coordination, and trust. Each scar on bone is also a mark of teamwork, of lives risked together. If we imagine them only as brutes, we miss the deeper truth. Brutes fall quickly. What endured here was not mindless strength, but disciplined risk. They learned where to strike, how to corner, when to retreat. Their spears were not random sticks, but tuned weapons, carved with care, balanced to pierce hides thicker than our skin could withstand. Their hunts were rehearsed, repeated, perfected over generations, and yet there is tragedy in the very perfection of this design. Close-range hunting left them vulnerable to injury rates higher than any other human species. A broken arm or punctured chest could leave someone dependent for months. The balance of strength and fragility was constant. To live as a Neanderthal was to know that every chase, every thrust of the spear might carry permanent cost. Still, the cost was paid. For more than 300,000 years, this strategy worked. In valleys and forests, on icy plains and in caves lit by orange fire, Neanderthals faced animals larger than themselves and prevailed. Their bones stand today, not as relics of defeat, but as monuments to endurance. As we turn from the physical battlefield of the hunt, another dimension emerges. Power in muscle can shape a world, but power in thought transforms it. The next chapter takes us into their tools, their mastery of fire, and the spark of culture that reveals their intelligence was no less remarkable than their strength. A fire is more than warmth. In the dark, it is a center, a boundary between danger and safety, a place where stories, however wordless, can unfold. For Neanderthals, fire was not an occasional gift from lightning. It was an instrument they mastered, placed deliberately within caves, arranged for heat and light, sustained through long nights of cold. Archaeologists find hearths layered like footprints, one over another, the sediment darkened by centuries of ash. These were not haphazard blazes. Stones arranged to contain coals, fuel gathered and stored, fire tended where it could spread light without suffocating the air. Some hearths show signs of different uses, one burning hot for cooking, another slow and steady for warmth, another to harden wooden spear tips in glowing coals. Fire was tool, protection, and symbol, and where there was fire, there were tools, stone chipped and shaped with precision. For decades, archaeologists dismissed Neanderthal technology as static, unimaginative. But closer study tells a more complex story. Their most distinctive method, the Levallois technique, was not simple rock bashing. It was controlled engineering. A core stone was carefully prepared, its shape mapped in the mind. With a planned strike, a flake detached in the size and shape, already imagined, ready to serve as scraper, knife, or spear point. This was not chance, it was foresight. Even more striking was their use of adhesives. Across Europe, archaeologists have uncovered traces of birch bark tar, a sticky black resin Neanderthals used to haft stone blades to wooden handles. To make it, birch bark had to be heated in a low-oxygen environment. Too hot, and it burns. Too cold, and tar will not form. Modern researchers, using only Paleolithic tools, often fail at the first attempts. Yet Neanderthals did it repeatedly, their tar traces found from Germany to Italy. These adhesives turned stone shards into composite weapons. Durable, efficient, deadly, their skill extended to materials beyond stone. Bone tools shaped into lissoirs, smoothers used for working hides, have been found in France, predating modern humans in the region. A tiny fragment of twisted fibers found at Abri du Maris in 2020 revealed another innovation. Cordage. 3-ply string, the earliest known in the world, crafted from plant fibers. This small, fragile remnant hints at a hidden technology of nets, bags, snares, tools of storage and capture that seldom survive the millennia. These were not the inventions of a dull mind. They reveal planning, precision, and a sense of transformation, how raw matter might become something new. And they reveal teaching. Such techniques could not be reinvented from nothing each generation. They had to be shown, shared, practiced. Knowledge itself became a kind of inheritance. The use of pigment pushes us even further. Red ochre stains on shells and bones show Neanderthals processed color for purposes beyond survival. In caves in Spain, geometric symbols and hand stencils painted in red ochre have been dated to more than 64,000 years ago, at least 20,000 years before modern humans arrived in Europe. If the dates hold, these are the oldest known cave paintings on Earth. Their meaning is lost to us, ritual, identity, ornament, but their existence cannot be ignored. To apply pigment where no practical function exists is to signal thought beyond the immediate. Even their dwellings hint at deliberate design. In Ukrainian open-air sites, mammoth bones form the foundations of structures, hides stretched across to create shelters against the wind. Inside caves, wooden platforms lifted bedding off damp floors. Living spaces were organized, areas for tool-making, for food processing, for rest. This was not chaos. It was arrangement. Taken together, these discoveries reveal a people who did not merely endure their world, they reshaped it. Fire extended daylight, stone became edge, bark became glue, bone became instrument, pigment became symbol. Each act was small, each fragile in the record, but together they form a pattern unmistakable. Culture. For centuries, Neanderthals were drawn as grunting caricatures, shadows to throw modern humanity into relief. But ash rings in caves, tar hardened. On spear points, shells rubbed with ochre. All whisper the same truth. These were humans who thought about tomorrow, who planned, who transformed the materials of their environment into extensions of their will. And yet their story is not only about tools. Objects alone do not explain endurance. Behind each hearth, each spear, each painted handprint, there were bonds, groups that taught, that healed, that remembered. In the next chapter, we step beyond the material traces to glimpse their societies, the care for the injured, the burials of the dead, the intimacies of small bands that gave survival its deepest meaning. Strength alone does not explain survival. Muscles heal slowly. Bones fracture. Teeth fall out. In a world as unforgiving as Ice Age Europe, no individual could endure alone. The true resilience of Neanderthals lay not only in their physical bodies, but in their capacity to bind themselves to one another. Archaeology reveals it not in grand monuments, but in quiet signs etched on fragile skeletons and scattered remains. Take the old man of La Chapelle, whose injuries spoke of years of pain. With severe arthritis, a damaged hip, and most of his teeth gone, he could not have hunted or even chewed tough meat. Yet he lived into his 40s, supported by others who must have softened food, carried burdens, and shared shelter. His survival is evidence of care, deliberate, repeated, enduring. The same story echoes at Shanidar Cave in Iraq, where skeletons reveal severe injuries, blindness, and amputations, yet lives extended well beyond the wounds. These are not accidents of luck. They show that Neanderthals valued their own, even when injured bodies could no longer contribute to the hunt. This care extends beyond healing. At Shanidar, excavators in the 1960s noted pollen concentrations around one skeleton, leading to the evocative suggestion of a flower burial. The interpretation has been debated, but what remains is the certainty that the body was intentionally placed with attention and care. At other sites, too, burials appear deliberate, bodies laid in depressions, flexed into resting positions, sometimes accompanied by tools or bones. For the first time in human history, we see not just survival, but ritual, the living shaping the memory of the dead. Burial is more than disposal. It speaks to recognition of mortality, to grief, to continuity. To place a body carefully is to acknowledge that the person matters beyond usefulness. Whether the gesture reflected belief in an afterlife, or simply sorrow and respect, it marks a profound step in the human story. Here were beings who thought about death, who responded not with indifference, but with meaning. Such acts suggest something larger, community. Most evidence points to Neanderthal groups of 10 to 20 individuals, small but deeply bound. These bands hunted, foraged, and sheltered together, their lives woven by necessity into collective rhythm. Within such groups, every absence was felt. When one fell ill, others adapted. When one died, others marked the moment. The intimacy of these small societies may have intensified bonds in ways hard to imagine in our vast, anonymous modern world. Evidence for division of labor emerges in wear patterns on bones and tools. Some skeletons bear the marks of repeated throwing or thrusting, others the distinctive strain of hide scraping or grinding. These are hints of specialization, of individuals honing skills for the group's survival. Women, men, young, and old, each carried roles, not identical, but complementary. Even more striking are the traces of symbolic expression. Pigment-stained shells, beads threaded perhaps as ornaments, ochre smeared on skin or hides. These objects speak of identity and belonging, of self beyond survival. To decorate the body is to say, I am part of something larger. In small groups, such gestures may have carried profound social meaning, signaling bonds, roles, or shared beliefs. The possibility of ritual structures adds to this picture. At Bruniquel Cave in France, researchers discovered circles of broken stalagmites, deep in darkness, lit only by fire. Dated to 176,000 years ago, long before modern humans arrived, this site speaks to organized activity in spaces beyond practical need. No food traces, no tool-making debris, only construction in silence and dark. Was it ritual? Social gathering? The purpose is unknowable, but the intent is undeniable. Neanderthals also lived through sound. Though no words remain, their anatomy offers clues. The hyoid bone of a Neanderthal throat matches ours, capable of supporting speech. Genetic evidence shows they carried the FOXP2 gene, linked to language. To coordinate complex hunts, to teach, tool-making, to pass on medicinal knowledge, communication was essential. Whether their language matched ours in richness we cannot say, but the rhythm of shared voices around fire seems almost certain. Even their diet reveals care. Dental plaque has preserved traces of plants with medicinal properties. Willow bark, containing salicylic acid, the natural precursor to aspirin. A Neanderthal with a painful abscessed tooth appears to have chewed such bark, perhaps self-medicating, perhaps guided by the knowledge of others. This is culture as healing, knowledge carried across generations. All of these strands, burials, care for the injured, symbolic objects, medicine, reveal not only survival, but meaning. Neanderthals were not isolated bodies of flesh and muscle. They were communities, bound by trust, ritual, and memory. Their strength was magnified by compassion. And yet, these same small groups may have carried vulnerability. Isolated bands limited the spread of new ideas, made populations fragile when climate shifted or resources dwindled. Care and ritual deepened bonds, but they could not shield entirely against the pressures of time and environment. Still, their legacy is undeniable. Each burial pit, each healed wound, each fragment of ochre whispers of lives lived with tenderness as well as toughness. To see them in this light is to recognize them as not just hunters of mammoth and bear, but as humans in the fullest sense, capable of empathy, of grief, of reverence. As we leave these caves and hearths, the next chapter widens the lens. For, even as Neanderthals flourished, another kind of human began to appear on the horizon. Our own species, carrying different tools, different bodies, different ways of surviving. The encounter between the two would reshape the course of human history. For more than 300,000 years, Neanderthals reigned across Europe and Western Asia, their bodies and cultures forged in the ice and wind. They had no rivals, only the constant challenge of the land itself. But around 45,000 years ago, the horizon shifted. A new kind of human stepped onto their continent, our species, Homo sapiens, migrating out of Africa with lighter frames, new tools, and unfamiliar ways of living. The long separation between two branches of humanity was about to end. For decades, the story of this encounter was told in stark, simple terms. Modern humans, armed with superior intelligence and advanced technology, swept across Europe and swiftly replaced the primitive Neanderthals. But archaeology and genetics have revealed something far more complex, a tale of contact, mixture, and gradual change, where competition was only one part of the story. The first difference lay in the body itself. Neanderthals were sprinters, compact and immensely powerful, their limbs short and muscular, built for explosive force and heat conservation. Homo sapiens were endurance hunters, long-limbed and gracile, their physiology favoring distance, persistence, and adaptability to diverse climates. Side by side, the contrasts were striking, two different answers to the same question of survival. Their tools reflected these differences. Neanderthals specialized in thrusting spears, designed for close combat with large animals. It was a strategy consistent with their power, though costly in injury. Modern humans brought projectile weapons, spears meant to be thrown, and later, the atlatl, a spear thrower that extended range and force. With these tools, prey could be brought down from a safer distance. It was a quieter revolution, one that meant fewer shattered bones, fewer hunts ending in blood. Yet this was no instant triumph of one over the other. Archaeological sites show a long overlap, thousands of years where Neanderthals and Homo sapiens shared the same landscapes. In France and Spain, tool industries blend traits of both species. The Châtel-Perronian tradition, for example, with Neanderthal, remains found beside blade tools long associated with modern humans. Were Neanderthals adopting new techniques through contact, or inventing them independently? The evidence suggests both. Innovation flowed in multiple directions, not just from one species to the other. The most surprising revelation came not from stone, but from DNA. In 2010, geneticists sequenced the Neanderthal genome and found their traces inside us. Between 1% and 4% of the DNA of most non-African populations today is Neanderthal in origin. This discovery transformed the narrative. Neanderthals did not simply vanish. They interbred with modern humans, leaving a legacy written into our very cells. This interbreeding likely occurred early, around 50,000 years ago in the Middle East, but perhaps also later in Europe. It was not a single moment, but repeated contact over generations. Some genetic contributions proved advantageous. Variants affecting skin and hair, fat metabolism, and immune response, helping Homo sapiens adapt to colder climates and new diseases. Others were selected against, such as those reducing male fertility, limiting the long-term persistence of Neanderthal genes. What survived was not random. It was the outcome of natural selection shaping a hybrid legacy. The archaeological record suggests more than biology. There may have been cultural exchange as well. Neanderthals had long mastered fire, adhesives, and sophisticated hunting strategies. Homo sapiens brought broader networks, more flexible subsistence methods, and projectile weapons. Did one learn from the other? Did groups merge, trading not just genes but stories, skills, and rituals? The silence of prehistory cannot tell us for certain, but the possibility lingers like a faint shadow across the record. Still, coexistence was not balance. Climate instability during this period created harsher winters and rapid swings in ecosystems. Prey species shifted, landscapes grew unpredictable. For smaller, more isolated Neanderthal groups, the pressure was immense. Homo sapiens with wider social networks and more adaptable diets, including fish, birds, and small game, may have had the resilience to endure where Neanderthal strategies faltered. Slowly their numbers grew, while Neanderthal bands shrank. 40,000 years ago, Neanderthals had retreated to their final refuges in Iberia, small pockets clinging to survival. The archaeological silence grows after that. A few thousand years later, they were gone as a distinct population. Yet, gone is not the right word. They remained in the genomes of the living, in the techniques carried forward, in the knowledge perhaps passed along before the last band disappeared. The collision of Neanderthals and Homo sapiens was not the story of one species annihilating another in a swift conquest. It was slower, more intricate, a mosaic of interbreeding, cultural overlap, ecological stress, and demographic imbalance. In the end, the difference may not have been intelligence, but networks. Modern humans, living in larger groups with broader connections, could share ideas and resources across greater distances. Neanderthals, with their smaller, tighter bands, carried deeper knowledge of local landscapes, but may have lacked the web of resilience needed when the Ice Age world shifted beneath their feet. And so, as the last Neanderthal hearth burned low, in a cave in southern Spain, their story did not vanish into darkness. It passed quietly into ours, genes scattered across billions of descendants, fragments of their strength and adaptation carried forward into the modern human line. Their disappearance was not a failure of mind or body, but the outcome of circumstance, climate, and the fragile mathematics of small populations in a vast, changing world. What remains is a reminder of kinship. The handprint on a cave wall in Spain, the ochre-stained shell, the healed bone of an injured hunter, all speak across time, not of them and us, but of another way of being human. They were rivals, yes, but also companions in the long journey of our genus. And though their bodies are gone, their legacy breathes in us still. In the final chapter, we step into the present, into the genes we carry, the lessons their disappearance whispers, and the haunting question that lingers. What does it mean to be human when another kind of human once walked beside us? The last Neanderthal fires burned out some 37,000 years ago. Their shelters fell silent, their tools lay abandoned, and their voices, whatever sounds they once carried through cold valleys, faded into memory. Yet they did not vanish entirely. Pieces of them endure, stitched into the fabric of our DNA, scattered across the living descendants of those who once shared the earth with them. The Neanderthal story is not only a tale of disappearance. It is a story of survival in another form, inside us. When geneticists first sequenced Neanderthal DNA in 2010, they uncovered a truth that rewrote the human story. Between 1% and 4% of the genome of most people outside Africa traces back to Neanderthals. That small fraction, carried in every cell, means their legacy is not confined to caves and bones. It walks with us. It shapes how our bodies respond to sunlight, to food, even to disease. Some Neanderthal genes aided fat metabolism and immune function, helping our ancestors endure the cold and pathogens of Eurasia. Others influence skin and hair, still visible in the mirror today. But inheritance is not only blessing. Certain Neanderthal variants are linked to greater risks of depression, diabetes, and autoimmune disorders in the modern world. What helped in an Ice Age landscape may be maladaptive in ours. Evolution preserves what works in one environment, not what lasts forever. Their DNA inside us is both gift and burden, echoing the cost of survival in harsher times. Yet the legacy of Neanderthals extends beyond biology. It lies in what their story tells us about humanity itself. For centuries, Western science drew human history as a straight line, primitive ancestors rising step by step to the pinnacle of Homo sapiens. Neanderthals were cast as failures, dead ends, evidence of our superiority. But the evidence has overturned that simple tale. They were not lesser. They were different. Another branch of humanity, equal in intelligence, distinct in adaptation, successful for hundreds of thousands of years. This realization challenges the arrogance of progress. For the vast sweep of our shared past, multiple human species walked the earth at once. Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans in the East, Homo floresiensis in Indonesia, and later Homo luzonensis in the Philippines, all coexisting. With us in a bush of diversity, not a ladder of inevitability. Our survival does not prove inherent superiority. It reflects circumstance, population size, climate shifts, networks of resilience. Had history unfolded differently, Neanderthals might still be here. Perhaps it would be us who faded into their bloodlines. That counterfactual haunts the imagination. What if another human species survived alongside us today? Would we recognize them as kin or as other? The thought unsettles because it dissolves the neat boundary we place around humanity. Neanderthals remind us that human is not one fixed form. It is a spectrum of possibilities, of minds and bodies shaped by different landscapes, yet capable of empathy, culture, and meaning. Their story also teaches humility about permanence. For 300,000 years they thrived, longer than Homo sapiens has yet existed. They endured climate swings, hunted mammoth and bison, built shelters, cared for their wounded, and created symbols on cave walls. And then, in the blink of evolutionary time, they were gone. A species so resilient could still be undone by a convergence of pressures: population isolation, rapid climate change, competition. Their fate is not remote from us. It is a warning. Today, we live in a world transformed by technology, numbers, and reach far beyond anything Neanderthals could have imagined. But we too are vulnerable to shifts in climate, to pandemics, to the consequences of overuse and imbalance. If a species as enduring as Neanderthals could disappear, what arrogance would make us believe we cannot? Their silence is a mirror, reflecting the fragility of even the strongest, and yet, in their endurance lies hope. Neanderthals teach us that intelligence takes many forms, that survival is not only about strength, but about care, about binding together, about transmitting knowledge across generations. Their burials, their healed bones, their pigments and tools, each reminds us that compassion, memory, and creativity are not new inventions of our kind. They are ancient human traits, older than our species, shared across branches of our family tree. To look into their world is to see ourselves more clearly. Our tendency toward ritual, our impulse to decorate, our need to grieve, our urge to teach, these are not recent sparks. They are embers carried forward from deep time. We are not only Homo sapiens, we are a tapestry woven with threads of Neanderthals and others now gone, each contributing to what we call humanity. In the end, Neanderthals were not freaks of nature in the dismissive sense once imagined. They were extraordinary expressions of it. Their strength was immense, their minds sophisticated, their cultures complex. They remind us that there is no single way to be human, no inevitable path to progress. There are only different ways of adapting, of surviving, of making meaning. The last Neanderthal may have died in a cave on the southern edge of Iberia, but the story did not end there. It continues in us, in the genes that shape our health, in the recognition that diversity itself is strength, in the humility to know that survival is never guaranteed. Their legacy asks us to carry forward not only their biology, but their lessons, resilience, community, and respect for the fragile balance of existence. As you close your eyes tonight and drift into sleep, remember that you are not entirely modern. Somewhere in your blood flows the memory of another kind of human, one who braved the cold winds of Europe, hunted giant beasts with wooden spears, and painted red ochre on cave walls. Their story is our story. Their survival echoes in our bodies. Their disappearance whispers caution to our future. And so, in the quiet of history, the Neanderthals remain, not as shadows of failure, but as mirrors of possibility. They remind us that to be human is not to be alone, but to be part of a lineage vast, branching, and unfinished. A lineage where strength and care, fragility and resilience, grief and imagination all entwine. Theirs is not just a chapter, it is a truth still carried within us, that humanity was never one thing, and never will be. Hope you loved it. Smash that like, hit subscribe, and share your location in the comments.